And,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
averages are usually not very descriptive. I usually give the same example every single time, which is like on average, the human being has one testicle, but that's hardly descriptive of what's out there.
What do you absolutely need to know today about creative and ad placements across mobile apps? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds, the podcast for growth marketers. My name is John Koetsier. Today we're chatting with someone super special. What he doesn't know about mobile ad tech, you probably don't need to know. His name is Tomas Yacachury. He leads partnerships at Kayzen, been at Jamp, Nielsen, is an adjunct prof at a university. He just released a massive report, the Programmatic Inventory Index, and we're going to get the Coles notes about what's going on inside. Welcome, Tomas.
Thank you very much, John. That's a great intro. I really appreciate that. And it's great to be back. It's great to be back. Exactly 1 year. I think it's going to be exactly 1 year since I was present here.
Get out of here. 1 year. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it was for the previous edition of the index. So
amazing.
It's
amazing.
It's almost a given. It's part of a thing now, making it here.
Exactly. I mean, it's an annual date.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, if you're on Growth Masterminds and you don't suck, you might get an invite back. And if you're amazing, it'll be an annual event. Who knows? We'll see.
Lovely. Hopefully I don't screw it up this year.
Exactly. Let's kick it off. For somebody who doesn't know what this report is, give us the broad strokes. What is this report?
Sure. So our Kayzen's Programmatic Inventory Index is our yearly report, right? Delivering insights derived from programmatic bid requests, right? The 2024 edition marks the fourth iteration of our index. So we started back into 2021. And we went from, producing a report where we're thinking about, what are the cool insights that we can get from programmatic data, right? That no one else is sharing, to, the report year over year has evolved to being more about delivering actionable insights. So that's why on our latest report, we've done a deep dive into 9 countries, right? Those countries being the US, Brazil, Mexico, UK, Germany, Japan, India, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. And for each of those countries, what people reading the index, what they're going to find is, first of all, insights from industry friends that we reach out to that are really experts on the field on each of these countries. So you're going to find, Hannah Parvaz speaking about the UK. I know she's a good
friend
of
yours. Who's Hannah Parvaz? Never heard of her.
Never heard. She's never been here. And also, we have like Christian Figoli from Dentsu, providing insights into Latin American market, and also, many other people that we've invited over, industry friends and so on. So first of all, these insights you're going to find. And then what we do is we analyze data on, ad formats, apps, top categories, ad formats, inventory pricing data. So what you're going to find there is for each country, for example, which are the top categories that you are most likely to find your users on that country through programmatic means, and through which ad formats you're going to be able to impact those.
And one thing that I saw that was super interesting, that as well, is like how much inventory you have to buy to really reach a certain percentage of the population of the audience you want to target, which is really interesting. It's also really interesting what you do in terms of breaking the countries out, because I know, for having done the ROI index for Singular, that's one of the hardest things to do, right? That's one of the most challenging things to do. You need scale of data in order to do that, to have actionable insights that are based in a significant chunk of data to apply them to an individual country.
Yeah, exactly. So one part of the reason why we chose those countries is because we had plenty of data. We wanted to make sure that we were providing, robust insights into that. I would love to do all of the countries in the world. It will probably take me a lot of time.
Iceland next. No.
Iceland next. We just need a couple more campaigns running in Iceland to do that.
Anything else in general about the report that you want to share?
Yeah, so beyond just, being able to look at what are the top apps, ad formats, and so on, we also provide pricing data, so price distribution. So you can really answer the question, how much ad impressions can I actually access at a specific price point, which is extremely valuable, right? Especially in programmatic, where CPM is the main currency. And then, of course, we have like key takeaways, which is really our own interpretation of the data and sort of like what are the things that you should take, which hopefully we can share a few more today.
Awesome. Okay, let's dive in. Before we do that, I want to ask a question because you separated out creative into different categories, right? Different ad impression categories. You had interstitial, you had rewarded, you had banner, you had native. It's really hard sometimes to separate things out into categories. I know because I've looked at this stuff, and sometimes something sort of fits in a couple buckets. Sometimes an ad unit is made up of like 3 pieces, right? Talk about that categorization.
Yeah, so we've taken the ad categorization, which we believe to be the most widely used and that people are more familiar to, because we wanted really to make the report accessible, right, for anyone reading it and really understand from the get-go what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So first of all, why are different ad formats needed? Just because, different ad formats, different type of ad placements provide different creative experiences, right? There are different ways to interact with the user on the app. Your creative will change depending on the ad placement. And of course, different ad placements will serve different campaign objectives better, right? So quick rundown on the ad formats. Banners, usually, static, whether it's 320 by 50 or 300 by 250, those medium rectangles, so those banners that you see, those are the most common that you're going to see. Native ad placements refer to those placements that really fit the look and feel of the app. So very common in social apps or news and weather apps. And then we have interstitials, which is full screen. They're usually skippable, somewhere between the 3 to the 8 second mark, depending on the ad exchange that you're running on. But they're high impact ad placements, full screen, which allow for static video or even interactive creatives. And then finally rewarded, which are opt-in ads. User opts in to view the ad for at least 30 seconds in exchange for some in-app reward. So again, very high engagement ad formats.
So what did you learn about these different categories? Like some general thoughts. What's the most common, most expensive? What's the most effective?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. And I would say it really depends on what your campaign objective is. So for example, let's say you're running a campaign where you want to really maximize reach, right? Get as many users as possible with a limited budget. Then you probably want to go with the cheapest ad formats and more frequent, which are usually banners and sometimes native, depending on the country. That's something that we're going to see when we do the country deep dives. But banners and native usually high scale, cheap, low engagement rate. Like the click through rates on those are usually below the 1%, even below 0.5%. So maybe more suited for branding, maybe more suited for app performance if you're leveraging view through attribution, right? And you don't depend on the click. And I would say the full screen formats like interstitials and rewarded, yes, naturally they will be more expensive. I would say especially rewarded, right? Because the user has opted in to see your video and you have like 30 seconds to show them something, right? That's a whole bunch of time in someone's life today. Those are usually quite expensive, but at the same time, they have a high impact. So they suit very well app performance. They suit very well, branding. Whenever you want to get maybe a more complex message through, you have that much time to go through it. So yeah, that's what I would say. And then of course, depending on the country, you're going to find some nuances here and there.
I've often thought that somebody who is trying to promote their app or pretty much anything that they're trying to advertise, a blended approach makes a lot of sense, right? Because let's say you're brand new, somebody doesn't know you, you don't have any brand recognition, you have to get your name and image out there, and you have to do that in such a way that you can reach a large number of people, and yet you also need somebody to take action. You want somebody to actually do something. And so I've wondered about a blended approach there. Sometimes, like the banner, there's ad blindness in a lot of us, right? So we kind of skip over stuff, but there's almost a subliminal or a subconscious thing that you start to recognize, sort of a brand, sort of a logo, maybe a character, who knows what, some color schemes, some typography, if you see it 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and then maybe something like a rewarded or an interstitial that demands your attention, grabs your attention for 15 seconds, 3 seconds, 30 seconds, 45, whatever it is more likely to be effective. Does the data bear that out?
For sure, for sure. Not on the data that we look, right? Because on the data that we look, we're looking at just programmatic bid requests. So we don't actually look at any campaign data, right? But what I can tell you is that, yeah, for sure, right? You need to, usually on every country, you kind of need to manage all the different ad formats. And what you've said, I think it's particularly important, especially if you consider ad sequencing, right? Like maybe having, different creatives will help you with different types of messaging, and the way that you sequence that message to a user may actually be what ends up leading to a conversion, right? I think, of course, nowadays in the in-app space, it's a bit more difficult to do sequencing sometimes because, for example, in iOS, where we have a lower availability of device ID, it's
Yes.
hard to identify users across different apps, right? But for example, you could identify that user within the same app, the apps of the same publisher by leveraging, for example, the IDFV, right? The identifier for vendors, which does perpetuate across apps within the same publisher. So even in the privacy-centric world that we live on today, there's still a way for you to do proper ad sequencing and leveraging the different ad formats to, try to touch different buttons on the user that you're trying to acquire.
Interesting. You also mentioned one other sort of kind of creative category, native to banner. What's that?
Yes. So native to banner is actually an implementation that I've seen in not only in programmatic, but I think ad networks usually consider that as well, which is like, I think came from gaming publishers, right? That were saying, like gaming publishers, the ad placements that they consider are, banners, interstitials, and rewarded. They don't consider native app placements because it just doesn't suit their app, right? Maybe there are a few games out there that do have native placements. So if you have a campaign that is just leveraging native assets, right, you're missing out. You as a publisher, you're missing out on those campaign budgets. So what this is an implementation that they've done, which is like, okay, I don't need to build native placements, but what I can actually do is allow my banner placements or even my interstitial placements sometimes to allow for native assets, right? So the way that we as a DSP would receive that is we see let's say a banner request, right? And within the banner request, we also have a native object. So that means that that banner placement would also allow for native assets. And in the end, the ad exchange or the SDK that is rendering the ad, what it will do is it will build a banner by leveraging the assets that you share on the bid response. So that's native. So the advantage of that is that, of course, gaming publishers can now access new demand. Advertisers that are exclusively leveraging native, they can now access new audiences, right? Gaming audiences, which previously they would not be able. But maybe for someone who's already leveraging that wide array of ad formats, maybe it's not that beneficial because it's not an actual native placement. Maybe you would be better serving there like a full screen interstitial or serving like an actual banner, whether it's static or slightly more interactive. So it's something to be careful, but it's something that's out there and it exists and could be actually beneficial for your campaigns.
Cool. It's funny how obviously you have the categorization that you have. It's funny how the elements of different types of ad strategies leak into each of the categories, right? So you got rewarded, which definitely gamers have used or apps have used a native strategy in, because it's like somebody recording on their phone, crappy quality. I was broke and then I played this game and now I have, $50,000 in my account, right? Or we've all seen those ones, right?
Exactly. But yeah, it's different ad formats of different needs, and you just need to find the right one for you. And that's I think one of the advantages of leveraging a programmatic platform, which is it gives you that flexibility to to target the different ad formats that better suit your needs.
Exactly. Cool. We're going to look at what stood out to you, what was cool in the US, the UK, Germany, India, Brazil, and Japan, some of the major markets that your report addresses. Before we go into that, talk about ad pricing segmentation. You've got a lot of details in there about ad pricing segmentation, 25th, 50th percentiles. What role does that play in targeting strategy and maximizing reach? Maybe explain that a little bit and then talk about how that plays out.
Sure. So price distributions, right? Something that we've been including on the index for the last 3 years. And, it went through a similar journey as the index overall, which is like, oh, this is really cool data. We're showing like, all the distribution of ad impressions, what's the actual market price for that, right? So the question that we're trying to answer there is like, well, what percentage of the inventory can I access to? What percentage of the overall impression opportunities available out there can I access at a specific bid price point? And we thought, well, this is very cool. We started showing that, more in general. And as the index evolved in time, so this report to make sure that it was very actionable. So now we're providing that for every ad format, for traffic with device ID, without device ID, for each OS in each of these countries that we analyzed, right? So very, very granular data. And really what we wanted, why are we doing price distributions? Because we wanted to be able to answer that question that I was saying before, is how many impressions can I actually access? And that's a clear advantage over maybe what you can find in other reports where you just get like an average CPM, right? And, averages are usually not very descriptive. I usually give the same example every single time, which is like on average, the human being has one testicle, but that's hardly descriptive of what's out there. So
that is the first time I've heard that one. That's a pretty good one. I like that.
Exactly, right? So averages, depending on the situation, can be fishy. Hopefully you don't call this episode like what do testicles and price distributions have in common?
Awesome. Very cool.
So yeah, we in fact, if you look at the report, you're not going to find the concept of average price points. We'll talk about medians, which is the 50th percentile, which represents 50% of the impressions. At what price point can you get them, right? So we believe that that's a much user, and that actually, for example, users leveraging the Kayzen platform, they actually have that information within our platform. So when they're setting their targeting campaign, right, they're setting the campaign setting, the campaign settings, and they want to select what's their target CPM that they want to achieve, or what's the max CPM that they want to use, even if they're optimizing towards CPI, CPA, whatever. They're able to see, okay, what percentage of the inventory can I actually access at that price point, right? And that's extremely valuable. Because if you're not getting enough traction, then maybe that means that you need to increase your bid price, and you can actually calculate how much you actually need to increase it. So super useful for that.
Cool. Okay, let's go country by country. Maybe one anecdote or one highlight that stood out for you. We'll start with maybe the biggest ad market on the planet. Maybe that's probably not a maybe. That is the US.
Yeah. So for the US, I think the key takeaway here for the US is very likely, the fact that it's price-wise, it's the most competitive market. It's the most expensive market consistently across all ad formats and OSs, compared to the other geos. So, looking at that price strategy, understanding that price distribution curve for each of the ad formats, it's essential, right? And in the US, you really need to have like a strategy across the 4 ad formats, because, especially casual games is huge, right? And with casual games, it's usually, banners, interstitial, and rewarded. But now we're talking about the native to banner. You need to consider native as well, right? Even in that gaming front. So yeah, really, really pay attention to the pricing, I would say there.
There's a reason people soft launch their apps elsewhere, and that's to do some learnings about what works and doesn't work when they're not in the most expensive market on the planet. Okay, second country, UK, also pretty expensive, I'm guessing, also fairly iOS centric.
Correct. Yes, 60% of the 28 million programmatic daily active users that we see are coming from OS devices. I think it's very similar in that sense in the US, in the sense of casual games being super relevant, and also like news and weather. So banners, interstitial, rewarded, very relevant. I think native to much lesser extent here, right? So maybe you don't need to be super on top of your native strategy, but for example, Vinted is the app that has the highest programmatic reach, right? And you want to advertise in Vinted, you need to have native creatives, right? So that's for sure. And I think overall, and this will apply to any country really in the European region, right? Or like especially under GDPR, or in this case, the UK GDPR, right? Which is you need to pay special attention to the price distributions for traffic without device ID, right? Not only on iOS, but Android as well. For example, if you look at Android, this is not covering the in the report, but we actually know this from the data that we have, which is like if you look at countries like the UK or Germany, device ID availability on Android, it's roughly 50%, right? And whereas you compare that to the US, Android traffic in the US, which is above 90%. So it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So in
Huge.
that, in the case of Europe, traffic without device ID, not only in iOS, is extremely important.
Staying in Europe, but moving to a country that, though it's rich, is largely Android, Germany. What stood out to you?
Germany, clearly the weather is not good in Germany, right? Because everyone's using weather apps.
Are you saying people are happy in Germany?
I'm saying the weather is not good. Then how people interpret that, I don't know. So I think there's still interesting things that could be correlated. First of all, we see a lot of people leveraging weather apps, right? So in that sense, banner and native are super relevant. And then the other thing is we see also a lot of shopping apps. So probably people, I can imagine people looking at the phone saying, weather sucks, I'm staying inside today. Well, let's do some shopping, So that's probably how it goes. But we see shopping and weather apps being at the top there. But as well, if you want to leverage interstitials rewarded as well, which are not that common on those two categories that I just mentioned, you're going to be able to tap into casual games or even core games like Call of Duty Mobile is huge in Germany at the moment. So, if you want to hit that core gaming audience, that's a good place to go.
Love it. Love it. Okay. Moving a little bit to the global south and to, I think it's the most populous country on the planet right now. If not, it's shortly to be India. Super focused on Android. Super interesting country, just exploding. What stood out to you there?
Yeah, as you mentioned, super focused on Android, right? 97% of the requests that we receive are actually coming from Android devices, which is huge. India, really, TrueCaller is the name of the game. The TrueCaller app is huge. It has a penetration of like 53% of the total programmatic daily active users that we see in India. We see them on TrueCaller. So again, banner and native are a must-have if you're running campaigns in India. Mm-hmm. And I would say the other thing is entertainment apps. So looking at entertainment apps, especially streaming apps such as, or video player apps such as Plate, GeoCinema, MX Player, those type of apps. So, in-stream video is actually very relevant mm-hmm. as well. People in India, people tend to use their phones to watch movies and stuff. They don't use so much TV. Yep. So connected TV is not that relevant when you think about it, but actually mobile OTT is much more relevant in India.
Super, super interesting. Maybe a somewhat similar market in some sense. Brazil, also very Android centric, also growing fast. What stood out to you there?
Yeah, to me, Brazil was very interesting because in Brazil, we saw a very good mix of apps and categories. So really having that, broad strategy across different app formats is necessary to be able to tap into the little bit of everything that's in Brazil. But what caught my attention the most was the availability of Spotify Programmatic Inventory in Brazil, which is huge compared to other countries. So there, leveraging your portrait videos for the Spotify video takeover ad format is essential. It really is necessary to maximize the reach that you get in Brazil. And here, what's interesting also in Brazil around pricing is that here traffic with device ID is actually much more relevant. Looking at those price distributions for traffic with device ID is much more relevant. Of course, first of all, because of Android, right? The high penetration of Android is 82%. Mm-hmm. But even if you're advertising in iOS, we do see, I don't know what the underlying reason is, to be honest, but we do see a much higher opt-in rate of users in Brazil compared to other countries. Wow. So there, even though you still need to mainly look at device traffic without device ID, but there's a whole bunch of devices people that are just opting in and sharing their device ID. So looking at those price distributions is particularly important.
Super useful for mobile marketers. Interesting. I wanted to hit one other country, and it's a super interesting one, Japan, right? I mean, it's kind of the quintessential original mobile country, right? And tech obsessed Japan, right? Gadget obsessed Japan. What they used to do with like feature phones, before smartphones was incredible and amazing compared to what you see globally. And they've, of course, adopted the smartphone like everybody else. Rich country, but also very different than others in a lot of different ways. What stood out there?
Japan is probably my favorite country when I look at this report, because as you mentioned, it's just so different, right? And every country is unique in that sense. Like if you look at those radar charts that we have, where we show the different app formats and app categories, you can tell how each country is different. They have a different culture, and the Japanese culture just manifests on that radar chart, because you can see that it's the thing that gives you the highest reach are entertainment apps, and those apps are manga apps. So if you're running campaigns in Japan, you need to channel your inner otaku, right? And make sure you target those manga apps. And very interesting is that on entertainment apps, on the app category, when you look at other countries, we don't usually find a lot of reach through rewarded. There are not just many rewarded app placements there. But when it comes to Japan, it's the ad format that gives you the highest reach on entertainment apps, right? Because many of these manga apps are just, free, but, maybe you have a limit of the number that you can read.
The next chapter,
get and if you want to read episode, the next, all you have to watch the rewarded. So that's very interesting to me. So I really, really love it, Japan in that sense. And then I think the other thing is native, especially to tap into X or Twitter, right? Programmatic inventory in Japan, which has a huge reach. It's one of the countries where it's most available. Twitter programmatically, it's one of the countries where it's most available. So there, your native strategy for X inventory is also very, very relevant in Japan.
Tomas, this has been super interesting. We've had a little tour of the globe. We've had some sociology and psychology of advertising across many different nations, and a lot of insight into creative formats and ad impressions and what works and what doesn't work. I want to thank you for taking this time. I really do appreciate it.
No, I'm the one who's thankful here, John, for you inviting me and having participated and share a little bit more about what we do. I'm really excited about our latest edition of the index. I think it's our best to date. And I'm not saying that because I'm the author. It's because I truly believe so.
I know a little bit about that sort of thing. Like when you do when you do a thing multiple times, you do get better at it.
Exactly. I think we have been getting better at it. Also the feedback from the industry has been fantastic. We've got really good feedback on the index this year. So really, I invite anyone watching this, listening to this, just go and download. You can find the index on our Kayzen webpage, kayzen.io. There's a resources section, and you go into the reports 2024 section, and you can just download there. If not, ping me on LinkedIn. I'll get you the report. And maybe if we're watching this somewhere, maybe we'll put the link either below or above. I don't know where.
Awesome. We'll figure it out. Thank you so much, Tomas.
Thank you very much, John. It was a pleasure.